Hey there, welcome, and happy Career Tip Tuesday. I am Resume Lezlie here with you for the second Tuesday of the month, which means it is my Behind Hiring segment. Today, I will be interviewing longtime hiring manager Greg Leos. I am very excited to speak with him, not only because I have really enjoyed networking with him over the last year or so, but also because I will be asking him about half questions from myself and half questions that I got submitted from real job seekers. So I am super excited about doing that. Before we get into the interview and Greg's introduction, I did want to go ahead and just remind everyone that next Career Tip Tuesday, is the third Tuesday of the month, and that means it is the Roast My Resume segment where I do live reviews of real job seeker resumes. So if you are interested in having your resume reviewed live on LinkedIn, go ahead and submit that to me. You can DM me through LinkedIn, or you can send me an email at leslie@resumeleslie.com. If you're not sure how to spell it, you can find it pretty much anywhere in my profile. So that's next week. This week is my interview with Greg Leos. I'm super excited. Greg is a longtime hiring manager and currently senior VP at Fiserv. For the past 20 years as a senior executive, he has successfully led high-performing business units and hired and interviewed countless professionals in the process. He has a passion for both leadership development and helping others to find the careers of their dreams. And we'll talk more about that, but I want to go ahead and bring Greg in.
Hey.
Hey, Greg, how are you? Thanks so much for being here.
I'm great. I love the intro. Like, I'm looking at the comments here. We get Thomas saying, I'm too busy dancing to start. It was a great intro. I wanted to dance too. It was great. It was very
awesome. Cool. Thank you.
Thanks for having me tonight.
Yeah, my partner, Andy, he does digital animation, and he created that for me when I first started doing the live so that we could let people sort of pile in a little bit. So that's awesome. I'm glad that you liked it. And Thomas, I'm glad you liked it as well. Okay, Greg, thank you so much again for being here. Just so everybody watching kind of knows, the history with Greg and I is we got connected through LinkedIn, and we really sort of bonded right away over the idea that there is a lot of maybe fixing or restructuring to be done in the hiring process. And right now it's feeling a little bit broken. So I think we both sort of really bonded over that and have been building a relationship sort of based on that and how we can both help to maybe make some positive changes. So Greg also has a side hustle of sorts called Career Focus Network. Greg, why don't you tell me a little bit more about Career Focus Network and why it's important to you to spend your extra time doing what you do with that organization?
Yeah, what little spare time I have, but you're very kind, and we're going to get to it. But I think the hiring process, generally speaking, is broken, and I hope that the next hour helps everyone out there to maybe learn a few things so that we can help you to make that process a little bit easier. And before we begin, a little bit of disclaimer, right? So my full-time job, and very focused on it, is to work for a company named Fiserv, a financial technology company. My comments today are my own. They are not representative of Fiserv necessarily, although I am very proud to work for that company, and I think is doing a lot of good things with respect to the hiring process and diversity and inclusion. So very, very proud of what they're doing there. But to your point, Career Focus Network is really a passion project for me. And what I saw was that there was an absence of a one-stop shop, so to speak, for career-minded folks to go in and have a platform to connect in with different experts, whether that's experts on how to maybe fine-tune your interview skills, whether it's, Lezlie, working with someone like you to fine-tune the resume. Maybe you want to improve your sales skills or your leadership abilities, or really just wasn't, everything was very siloed and bifurcated. So Career Focus Network is a platform with professionals where I have a bench, so to speak, of different professionals with different subject matter expertise. You go into the site, you sign up, you get some really cool information, you get a free ebook, but depending on your needs, you get access to a number of folks that I've known over the last couple of decades who do great work in terms of helping folks to better their careers.
That's awesome. And the ebook that Greg mentioned is super helpful. He actually sent it to me just to kind of get some feedback. I'm sure he sent it to several people, but before he put that out, and now it's out and it's really great. So careerfocusnetwork.com, right, Greg? That's the website for it.
It's that simple. You put
Yep.
your little plug, right? So you put your email in, you automatically get sent the ebook, and the ebook is about how do you work with recruiters more effectively, kind of demystifying a lot of that, the relationship struggles sometimes between a candidate and recruiters. And I went out and interviewed a number of recruiters and got their feedback, and I think it'll help folks who are in the midst of looking for a role to better understand what recruiters go through. And consequently become more successful at better outcomes in the job search.
Love it. I love it. I think that the recruiter and hiring manager perspective is so sorely needed in this space. And I love that, you bring sort of the hiring manager perspective, and then you were sort of conscious enough and aware enough to really go out and speak with recruiters and get their feedback too. That's one of the things I really like about what you're doing with Career Focus Network. So that is awesome. Yeah. Okay, let's talk a little bit about that idea of the hiring process being broken. Can you elaborate a little bit more on what troubles you about it and really what it means when you say that you feel like it's broken?
Yeah, it is, I think, fundamentally too difficult for folks to find a job. Just hard stop. I have some tremendous friends who are recruiters, so they'll understand when I say this, it's not meant to be taken personally, but if our hiring process was smooth and easy, there wouldn't be a need for recruiters. There wouldn't be that need. Recruiters feel a need in terms of trying to find talent for companies. I think there's challenges on both sides, right? It's like any sort of relationship. If it's a bit dysfunctional, there typically are challenges on both sides. And we can certainly spend some time, I think, talking about both sides there. But I think, on one hand, I see candidates who are ill prepared when they come in for an interview sometimes. I see candidates who have poor follow through, who don't network effectively. And I also see on the flip side, I see far too many companies and colleagues of mine and other companies that are trying to put candidates in boxes. We were talking about this earlier, Lezlie. Coming across, it's almost cliche at this point where you see a parent who's taken 5 or 10 years out of their career to actually raise a child, and then they're put in the box of, well, you've been left behind, you can't multitask, you can't handle responsibility. Are you kidding me? You're just raised a kid. I know that what my wife does on a day-to-day basis, as hard as I work, she puts me to shame. So I think sometimes companies that are not forward-thinking and aware tend to want to put candidates in a box. And I also think that, and look, we could talk the entire hour just about this, and I'm sure we'll talk more about it. I think a lot of candidates think that a lot of companies are looking for the best talent. And I think the best companies are. There's no question. I feel very confident that we are at Fiserv, but a lot of companies are not necessarily looking for the best talent, and that may be strange to hear. Really, what they're doing is they're trying to mitigate risk. The only thing worse than not finding a talented person is actually giving the job to somebody who is a bad fit. And that just blows up in everyone's face. So it becomes an exercise in trying to make sure we don't make a mistake, as opposed to expanding our horizons and looking at folks that perhaps maybe don't have this linear path in their career, but could ultimately be very, very successful. I'm sure we'll get to more of that later on.
Yeah. And I totally agree with you. And I talk to job seekers a lot and hear frustrated job seekers talk a lot about the issues that they're having, the challenges that they're facing. Yeah. And as much as I agree that things can be done differently and better, and certainly should be, I think it's important to sort of realize both sides of the equation, because when you talk about, a hiring decision maker, a recruiter or hiring manager, really seeking risk mitigation as opposed to the right person for the job, that's not because they're, bad people, or, they're lazy or whatever. There are so many pressing sort of issues for them, from being overworked to being undertrained, which I think is a big piece of the puzzle when you talk about putting people into boxes, because that's easier, and it takes less thought and less knowledge on who those people might be outside of that. So it's, as we, talk about this and continue to talk about this throughout the year and even further, I'm really trying to talk to people like you who have sort of that angle of understanding what the requirements are that are being placed on the people in those recruitment and hiring roles, as well as focusing on how we can make the process better for job seekers as well. So I think it's really interesting that you brought that up.
100%. I would just two comments to that. I think one, an understanding of others, I think, helps us to have the best outcomes, not only in the job search business, but in everything, right? I think, if we understand our fellow human being a little bit better, I think we're all better off. There is no question. Business goes at 100 miles an hour today. It has changed so much. Making mistakes can be devastating when you're looking to hire the right person. So we can certainly talk about things from the perspective of the hiring manager. We can opine for the next hour if we want to on everything that's wrong. But I think also I'm a big believer in just being practical. And I hope that at the conclusion of this hour, what we've helped folks that are in the midst of a job search out there to understand is, look, we're not going to change the world tomorrow. But what we're going to do is create awareness. We're going to understand the rules of the game, how it's played. We can all agree that, there needs to be some fundamental changes. But how do we navigate through that effectively so that we can help you to have the best outcome possible and get the job that you're looking for, that you think that you'd be well suited for? So how do you proactively get around some of these obstacles that you anticipate may be there? If you've been a job hopper in the past, perhaps, and I don't even really like that phrase, but it's used, how do you get out in front of that? If you are a mother or father that's been out of the workforce for 5 years, taking care of a child, or perhaps a parent, right? How do you get out ahead of that? All you can be is in control of yourself. You can't control a hiring manager or the process, but you certainly can get your mind right to make sure that you're putting yourself in the best position to succeed. So I'm hopeful that we'll be able to do that over the next hour.
Yeah, perfect. That really fits in well with something that I try and work with job seekers on a lot, which is mindset and preparation. So I love the idea that we're sort of coming at it twofold. We want to acknowledge what's going wrong, and we want to work toward fixing it. And also, in the meantime, we want to help job seekers navigate around that. So let's talk a little bit more about some of the actionable steps that people can take. So when we're talking about, you mentioned putting people into boxes and trying to mitigate risk on the hiring end. And some of the boxes that I see a lot of, number one, really are related to internalized biases, whether they're conscious or unconscious, related to personalized things like race or age, or even, your background. These are one type of bias that comes up. And then another type that comes up that may not seem to tie in, but the more I work in this sort of area, it really does tie in, is when people are in a career change. They come from a background, a different sort of career that doesn't obviously relate to what they're trying to pivot to, and they get put into a box just based on whatever that person on the other end what their sort of understanding of that background happens to be, however true or not true that understanding is. What can job seekers do to overcome that challenge? How can they try to step around some of that?
Yeah, no, it's a great question. I think, look, first, there has to be acknowledgement, right? As frustrating as it may be, there has to be an acknowledgement in job seekers, amongst job seekers, that most hiring managers have a tendency to want to hire folks that act like them, look like them, come from the same background. If they went to an Ivy League, they're going to probably be apt, whether they realize it or not, to want to hire somebody with an Ivy League background. You have to acknowledge that. And that's not to say it's going to happen every time. There are a lot of great hiring managers out there that understand, that they're going to be most successful if they expand that tent. But you have to acknowledge what you're up against. Otherwise, you'll never figure out a way to get around it. First is an awareness that you are going to, be put into a box, probably, right? Generally speaking, that's the case. If you have a big gap, you need to be prepared to speak to that gap and do it as proactively as you can before it's brought up. Get it off the table. If you feel that perhaps your background doesn't fit perfectly with the culture of the organization, how do you acknowledge that? How do you create, how do you accentuate the strengths that you have to kind of counterbalance perhaps some deficiencies, maybe not deficiencies that you see in yourself, but that you anticipate that, a deficiency or a challenge the hiring manager may have, right? And know your audience, know who you're speaking to, understand the company going in, understand the culture. Look, I can't tell you how often I talk to folks who are in the midst of a job search and an interview who know nothing about the background of the person they're interviewing with. I gotta tell you, it blows my mind. In this era with LinkedIn, where you have everything at your fingertips, the least you can do is go in and understand the background of the hiring manager, understand where they went to school, what's their experience, have they been at their current company for a long time, which suggests they value tenure, or have they been more entrepreneurial in their background? And most importantly, do you know anyone who knows your hiring manager, right? LinkedIn will tell you that, right? And are you leveraging your network? And I know that, Lezlie, you want to get into the power of networking, which I think is, if you want to talk about the single most important positive that anyone who's out there listening right now, who's in the midst of a job search, can have, it is a network. And if you don't have a strong professional network, rededicate yourself to getting one, because it is absolutely important. And we'll talk about how to build one. We'll talk about how giving creates a great network as opposed to just always getting. So we'll talk a little bit about that, but really leveraging that network to either have somebody who's going to advocate for you with the hiring manager in the company, or at least give you some insight in terms of what you might be up against, and so that you can really compete effectively on that job interview.
Perfect. Yes, and absolutely. I want to get into talking about networking and incorporating LinkedIn in with your networking. Before we leave this question of being.
Can I talk a little bit about bias, though? I don't want to interrupt you, because I think bias and in
Go
this,
for it.
much more aware era that we have, and I'm hopeful that this is just a down payment for so much more that we're going to do in our future. I have a young daughter, and I'm very hopeful for the future in terms of just expanding the tent. But if you're a woman and you want to go work for a company in the financial technology world, we don't have enough women in financial technology. There's no question. I think, incumbent upon folks to, again, we can agree that that's incorrect, but are you going to interview with a company that has been very focused and vocal on wanting to expand that tent? If that's the case, then that's great. Then that might be a place for you, and you might want to investigate that as you're interviewing, right? That you could potentially bring a fresh perspective into the organization. If it's a company that hasn't really said much, done much in the area of inclusiveness, diversity and inclusiveness, well, then you have to ask yourself the question, do you want to even be in the interview to begin with, right? But secondarily, also understand that there may be some challenges for you, right? If you're a person of color, if you are a woman, and shouldn't be that way. But I think doing your homework ahead of time. Look, I'm all for the practicality. We all need jobs, right? I understand that. I don't dismiss that at all. But I also think do your homework on the companies that you're interviewing for. Not every company is going to be the right fit for you. So, be prepared in terms of what you're doing when you get in there.
Yes, I completely agree with that. And I'm really glad that you brought that up. Part of the preparation and the investigating the company and doing that research beforehand is keeping your own power as a job seeker and understanding, of course, sometimes there are times when we just need jobs and we have a little less power in those situations. And that's fine. Do what you have to do to put food on the table. But when you're in a position to really decide or make some more choices about it, doing that research and looking for the companies that not only align with what you believe in from a website copy perspective, but actually from an action perspective. What are they doing? Who are the people within their company? Who are the senior leadership? Who's on their board, et cetera? Figure out if they are representing the type of diversity or the type of company environment that you want to be in. And if they're not, use your action or your decision not to act, not to apply as your power. Choose the companies that are standing behind the things that you believe in. So I love that you mentioned that. I have a quick question. I know we're mostly messaging towards job seekers, but if there is a recruiter perhaps listening or watching, do you have any advice for someone who maybe looks around and sees themselves in an environment that's not as inclusive or that does more risk mitigation than really trying to hire for the right person for the part? Do you have any advice on something that they might be able to do to either try to enact change from within or to pivot themselves and put themselves in a better situation?
Yeah, I think if I understand your question, in terms of a recruiter working to recruit on behalf of other companies, and whether that's
either on behalf of other companies, within an agency, or just being internal within one singular company, if they're seeing practices that they don't think maybe are beneficial to the whole and adding to the diversity and inclusivity of their company, is there anything they can do personally to try and make sure that their job is doing what they want it to do, or to speak up and talk to people within their company? What do you think?
I think the power of the collective is so underestimated. And what I mean by that is that as consumers, for example, we can show our voice. We can really demonstrate how we feel about something by what we purchase and what we don't purchase. And to your point, candidates can speak very loudly in terms of the kind of companies they want to see in the workplace, depending upon who they interview with and who they don't. Same thing with recruiters. It just every facet, right? And I think ultimately, if we are really committed to creating a more inclusive workplace, then we need to hold companies accountable that don't operate in that way. And we do that by who we choose to go to work for, who we choose to interview with, who we choose to partner with, who we choose to consume goods and services from. And I think that will ultimately, in this era, in this environment of capitalism, which I love. I'm a capitalist. I'm a hardcore capitalist, but money talks. And if companies start to recognize that they are not getting talent walking in their door because they are more focused on risk mitigation or hiring a certain type of person or not having an expanded tent, then I think we're really going to see some things change. I think, look, there's the moral imperative, right, of making sure that we provide ample opportunities to everyone, that your talent is what matters, not your background, not your gender, not anything else, right? But there's also good business sense. And, I'm very fond of what Fiserv is doing from a diversity and inclusiveness perspective. for example. There are a lot of companies, I think, out there that understand there's not only the moral imperative, but it's just good for business that if we can be this successful by not properly including a significant chunk of the workforce, what are we going to do when we actually bring everybody to the table properly? I mean, it's amazing. Yeah. That's what gives me so much optimism in terms of our economy, is that we have so much room for improvement in terms of inclusiveness. And once we get it right, I think the sky's the limit. But again, I think to get back to the original point, I understand the practicality of needing a job. I get it. You have to make those choices. You do. But if you have the choice to focus on one company or another, focus on a company that is in alignment with your vision, your career vision, but also your values. I think long-term, you'll be a happier, more productive employee. And then also, I think it sends the right message to companies that are out there hiring.
Yep, I totally agree with you, and I love the idea, and I think it's coming out more and more. I spoke with a sort of new connection by the name of Anthony Vaughn recently, and he really has this idea that job seekers have a heck of a lot more power. Employees have a heck of a lot more power than our current system would have most of us believe.
Yep.
So I love that you touched on that, hey, when companies start to realize that they're losing out on top talent because their competitor is more diverse and that's where the top talent wants to be, that's going to really, that's going to be a loud message. And I think the only way that happens is if people are more thoughtful and more mindful about their actions and where they choose to apply, and where they choose to spend their talent. Basically, you talk about voting with your dollars, spending your money, spend your talent in places that matter to you as well. I love it.
Real quick, I think just one quick 30-second comment. I also want to make sure, because I'm sure there's folks that are out there, well, easy for you to say, Greg, right? Like, I'm not employed and that sort of stuff. And look, it is frustrating when you feel that you're an incredibly talented person and you feel that you're rejected, not because of your talent level, but because of other factors. It's incredibly frustrating. So I want to acknowledge that. I know it's real. Look, it's happened to me. I mean, it's funny how years and years ago, I was too young for the job. Now I think I'm probably venturing into territory where one day I might be too old for the job. Like, I'm still the same guy. Like,
right.
But it is very, very frustrating. And all I can say is stay true to your values. Keep the long approach and execute on your plan, and just try as you can just not to let it get you down, right? But we have to, I think, acknowledge it can be very frustrating for sure.
Absolutely. And on that note, let's talk a little bit more about networking. Before we do, I just want to let you know I've looked at some of these comments and it looks like people are really appreciating your perspective, Greg. So again, just as a halfway through, I want to say thanks for being here. I think people are really enjoying it, and I know I certainly am as well. Okay, so talking about that frustration as a job seeker and talking about networking as a way to overcome some of these challenges, whether it's based on completely, unrealistic personal bias, or if it's based on, hey, maybe my background is a little choppier than I'd like it to be, or maybe I have a very nonlinear background where it's hard to thread the needle and tell that story. What does networking do to help alleviate that? And then how can people, job seekers who have never really spent much time networking, how can they get started? What are some of those actionable steps that really gets them starting to connect with people?
Yeah, I am extraordinary. That's why when you asked me to do this, I jumped at it. I think networking is the secret sauce to career success. Right? I think it is the rocket fuel that will take you to places that perhaps you can't even dream of going to right now. I attribute my professional network to the majority of my successes I've had in my career. Can I tell you a little personal story about how my network helped me, Leslie? Can we do that?
Yeah, go for it. Absolutely.
So this is a personal story. So my previous company, I was leaving my previous company, and we did exit. I'm very, very happy. So it's a very pleasant situation. But my last year there, I flew 144,000 miles in 1 year. Yes.
Wow.
It's true. It's not an exaggeration. I was flying
Oh,
literally all over the globe, and I needed to leave. I needed to be home more. I had a young daughter who's not as young anymore. She's still young, but she was super young. Wanted her to know that I was her dad.
yeah, that you existed.
And so I actually reached out to someone that I knew at a previous company years and years prior, and we reconnected at a trade show. And I said, I'm looking. I'd like to get off the road. Certainly not opposed to traveling, but 140, and I'm circumnavigating the globe like 4 times a week. I noticed that there's a job opportunity here. And rather than just apply to it, can you tell me about it? Can you tell me if you think it'd be a good fit? And he said, are you kidding me? I think you'd be great here. So he actually while we were sitting there, texted the hiring manager, who's a colleague of his. And I interviewed right there at that trade show. And from that, I ended up working for the company, which turned into Fiserv. It's a long story. It was a joint venture back then. And but that's why I'm here. And I've been at Fiserv 5 years. So, I reached out to somebody who I'd been connected with for many years, who was kind enough to actually open the door for me. And of course, I had to do the rest. I had to interview properly. I had to be the right person for the job. But it was really that advocacy that gentleman did for me that really opened the door and put me at the front of the line. So I can't begin to tell you how important it is to create a great network that you can tap on the shoulder when you're in need. I'm sure, when we could talk about this now, or if you want to do it later, how do you create that network? That's always a big question that I get. But I will say it's more important, no offense, but I think having a great resume is important, Lezlie. But I think it's more important than having a great resume. I think it's more important than having a fancy suit on an interview. I think it's more important than any achievement. Having that professional network of folks that you can rely upon, I think is just, it's gold. It really is.
Yep, I totally agree. I talk a lot about it getting you past what I call the anonymous submission phase of the recruitment cycle. If you just apply online or just, through a job board or the company website or what have you, you're just one of potentially hundreds of people for that role. Maybe if your resume is really, really spectacular, you might get some attention. But
if they work for you, it's going to be spectacular. I've seen it.
Thank you. Even then, it's just anonymous until somebody meets you for the first time. And you have to push really hard to get them to want to meet you or speak with you for the first time. And if you have that advocate internally, if you have someone that's going to bat for you, that already knows you talk about risk mitigation. My goodness, having somebody vouch for you is exactly one of the best ways to mitigate and lower risk for the person who's making the decision. So
there is no doubt about that. In fact, we and I just think alike. I mean, if you are looking to mitigate risk for a company, having a known entity within that company, someone that is well respected, which is what the person that helped me, who's extremely well respected, to vouch for you, you get moved right to the head of the line. Absolutely.
Yep. Absolutely. We just got an interesting comment that I think can help dive a little bit into how to actually network. Somebody said that they totally agree with you that networking is super important. I think industry groups are a great start. This is from Catherine. I think industry groups are a great start. It's helped me in my jobs as well, finding new supplier, new customers, etc. Great way to show leadership as well. I totally agree with that. And that's something that I talk to job seekers about is either getting involved in actual groups on LinkedIn, which we'll talk about in a minute, but just finding organizations that are built around or in support of the industry or type of jobs that you're wanting to get into or wanting to continue into. It's a fantastic way to meet the right people who can tell you things you need to know or help you get where you need to go, and that you can also turn around and help. Like you mentioned, having a network based on your own giving is so much more valuable often than taking from others. So industry groups are a great way. What else do you think, as far as somebody who's like, all right, I believe you, Greg, I need to start networking. How do I do it?
Give me some practical tips.
One step do I take? Or, can you give a little advice on that?
I'll give you two. So I think first and foremost, you have to give back, right? So what I see too often is folks who reach out on LinkedIn, hey, I'd love to be part of your network. Oh, okay. I mean, we could be friends on LinkedIn, but that's not very directional. Doesn't tell me what you need. It's about giving back. Are you reaching out to old colleagues at prior companies that maybe they get a job promotion or they've moved on? Have you offered a heartfelt congratulations and connected with them? Are you available yourself to help somebody navigate a network into a company? If you're able to do that, right, without anything in return, that's how you strengthen those bonds. And I think sometimes people think it's about getting into groups or going into, back when we could see each other in person, going to, happy hours and, it's not about that. It's not about accumulating names. It's about building substantive relationships with people. And that takes some time. Okay. So that my first tip is you got to take the long approach.
Yes.
You got to build a network before you need it.
Yes.
Okay? And that takes time. That takes deliberative time every single day, every single week to reach out to folks that to talk to them, to see what you can do to offer to them. Here's the second thing, though, that you can do. If you have a more immediate need, let's say you're currently out of work, be specific on what you need. You would be surprised how many people, and this is part of what also gives me great encouragement that we are heading in the right direction, even though sometimes things can get a little rough out there. The kindness that people show, right? And I know that when I was in early stages of my career, I was very direct. I said, look, I'm looking for this job in this particular company. Is there anything you can do to help me to get there? And particularly if you're in the early stages of your career, us folks that have been around for a little while would love to mentor folks. But even if you're getting back into the workforce or you've been laid off, we love to mentor folks. We love to help folks. And I think most people do want to help, but you need to be specific on what you need, right? Not just saying, I just want to connect with you. That doesn't do much. But if you reach out to somebody that you think can bring value, and you say, look, I know you're extremely busy. I just want 15 minutes of your time. I want to know more about this particular company. Here's what my goals are. Do you think there's anything you can do to help me to get from point A to point B? I would tell you probably more than 50% of the time, if you're genuine and heartfelt in that way, folks are going to want to help you. And, or at least they're going to know somebody who can help you. And then that's also a way you build a network, but it helps you to get to where you need to go more effectively.
Yep. And I agree. There are short-term tactics that can be helpful when you're in that immediate need. But the most helpful thing that you can do for yourself is to build that network before you need it. And, you talked about giving, and I think that is extremely important, and giving without the expectation of receiving something in return, at least not an immediate like trade for trade. I think another way, if maybe you don't have something specific to offer, and you're not doing an ask right away, in that short-term sort of tactic, if you're doing more long-term, flattery will get you everywhere. You just start to notice who out there is posting things or saying things that aligns with you and that resonates with you, and then reach out to them and just tell them that I loved what you said about XYZ. It really resonated with me because ABC. I would be thrilled to connect and have the opportunity to learn more from your content. Something that just says to them, hey, I'm pretty much just reaching out to tell you that I think you're awesome. That feels really good for people, especially when life gets so busy and the world has been so tough for the last year plus with everything that's been going on in the job search market. So flattery is really important and can really be helpful if you don't have maybe a give that you can offer. So I wanted to mention that.
I think it's a great comment, and I agree with you 100%. I would take it even a step further. That is giving, right? I think in this era of social media where it feels like you can't open up Twitter without there being something negative out there, right? We are in dire need of positivity. So put some positivity out there. Make sure it's genuine though, right? But if somebody is writing something, putting some content out there, I mean, that's really the third thing I would suggest in terms of building a network is to engage on, say, LinkedIn, engage on this platform. Don't just lob out connection requests because those are pretty meaningless unless you're going to do something with them. I think engage on the content, like content. To your point, Lezlie, very well said. If somebody's putting out content that helps move you forward in some way, right? Reach out to them and let them know. It doesn't have to be a long dissertation. It could be a line or two. And I can assure you, you're right. Flattery will go a long way, especially for the male ego. But I also think people want to know when I put content out there, I want to make sure that people are reading it and that it's making an impact on someone. And if it is, duly noted, and they become part of my network and part of my tribe, and I want to help them get where they want to be. So, so it's a good comment. You're absolutely right.
Love it. Love it. Okay. I want to get into our questions from job seekers. Before we do, I want to recap. We've talked a lot about networking, and we really have sort of alluded to the fact that LinkedIn is a huge piece of that and really makes networking easier than ever before. We were talking earlier this morning and you gave me sort of a statistic about how LinkedIn has come into play with your hiring. Can you share that, how much you've used it or how it's come into play?
Yeah, I mean, this is unscientific. I didn't go back and look, but I would be shocked if it's less than, 75% of the people that I have hired in the last 5 to 10 years have come from referrals, have come from my network. It's really that high. Recently, I was able to hire someone on my team who came with a wealth of knowledge, just a fantastic lady. And that was cold. It came externally, but you know what? I was shocked.
Yeah. So that was just an application.
20 years ago, I wouldn't have been shocked, right? That would have been the norm. So my network is so extensive that typically I can reach out to somebody who knows somebody who knows somebody. And so again, I can't emphasize enough the power of that network to get you where you want to go.
Great, great. So all of you watching or listening, you're on LinkedIn and you're in the right place. Keep doing it. Keep using LinkedIn. Keep networking with people. You heard it here that hiring managers certainly are using LinkedIn and using their networks to find good people to hire. All right, let's see. Moving into, so those are pretty much the questions that I had for you, but I did ask my network to submit questions, real job seekers to submit questions to me that they would want to know if they got to bend your ear for an hour.
Great.
So I have a first question here from Cindy. Cindy wants to know, for someone who has a quote unquote checkered career, that's Cindy's words, for someone who has had a checkered career, i.e. job hopping or losing jobs for a number of personal reasons, what's the best way to address that with a potential employer?
Yeah. So you probably noticed my reaction when I heard the, checkered, right? So who says, right? Like, I mean, again, if I could go back 20 years and tell my younger self something, it's don't expect your career to have a linear path. No one's, look, maybe every so often you guys have a rare exception, but typically careers don't fit a linear path. They're not the staircase up. So be careful when using those characterizations about yourself, because you might be more in the norm than you may think. It's just a lot of folks don't like to disclose that, right? But to get to answering the question, how do you get around that, right? It is making sure that you have a good talk track around every move that you've made or been forced to make. And it's okay to say that you took a chance at a job and it didn't work out. Perfectly okay, as long as you can answer the reason why before it's even asked, right?
Yep.
It is okay to say, look, I don't have a tenure on my resume that is 5, 10, 15 years. But what I do bring to the table is a lot of grit and tenacity and resilience. Because look, let's be honest, right? If you can continue to lose jobs or change jobs and pick yourself up and put yourself right back in the workforce, you got a heck of a lot of grit. And if, people often ask me, what is the number one thing that you look for in a candidate? It's not their pedigree. It is not their talent level. Of course, all those things matter. It is grit. And if anyone out there is familiar with the Angela Duckworth book, Grit, I talk about it all the time. And that's where grit is where passion and perseverance meet. And you have grit, right? So folks that have a lot of drive, but also when they fall down and they scuff up their knees, are willing to pick themselves up and persevere and have the resilience to move forward. So in my mind, as long as somebody has the right talk track and talk about what they've learned from their missteps, if there are any there, or the challenges that they've overcome, I'd rather pick that person than somebody who's had a very straight path. And then if they get thrown a curveball, are they really going to be able to hit that curveball over the fence? Maybe not, but somebody who has grit will be able to. So,
okay. Yeah, I like that, having that talk track. I call it taking control of your narrative, but I think that's the same sort of idea. You got to know what you're going to say about it. Don't let it blindside you. I think that's great. Just be prepared and have a good talk track around it. That's excellent.
Lezlie, I one thing, and I know you want to get to the questions. One thing that I always talk to candidates about when they say, well, what's one thing I can do differently? Don't just read off your resume. Like, we can read your talents, we can read your achievements. Have a talk track on what makes you different, right? And you can even pull things from your personal life. Challenges you've overcome, passions that you have, right? When I talk about my leadership, I don't just talk about the fact that my teams have succeeded hitting a revenue number every year. Well, of course, I could put that on a resume very easily, but I talk about my deep and profound interest in helping folks move their career, as evidenced by the fact of this passion project that I have here, the Focus Network. That's evidence of my leadership ability. That's part of my talk track. So I would recommend that everyone take a step back, who's out there, who's looking for a role, and really think about what makes them special, and figure out how to articulate that eloquently when they're in front of a hiring manager.
I love it. That's fantastic. Excellent. Thank you. Thank you. Okay. Let's see. I had another question come in. This one's from Lori, pretty short and sweet. Any age-related advice for 55 plus?
Age-related advice. Ageism is a real thing. It is. And I think my first advice, which was the general advice I think I had at the outset, is just be aware of what you're dealing with. Yeah. And I'm not going to sugarcoat it. There is ageism out there. There's no question. What you need to do is get out in front of it. What you need to do is make sure that you are up to date with all of the new technology. I know it sounds a bit cliche, but you have to get your arms around it, invest the time. But also don't be afraid to show your age. Don't try to, if you're 55, don't go in an interview dressed like you're 35. Don't need to do that. Yeah. Right. Be who you are and be confident in who you are. Confidence is associated with youthfulness. So going in with confidence, and look, it's like we said at the outset around, biases, right? If a company is going to be concerned about your age and not concerned about your talent level, what you can bring to the table, do you even really want to be there to begin with? So look, easier said than done, right? Because you're looking for a job and it's frustrating. But acknowledge that ageism is there. Do what you can to mitigate it. Look for companies that aren't going to care about that, and bring your best self to that interview and let the chips fall where they may. And I think if you do that, you will increase your chances of winning that job and mitigating that perceived risk of hiring someone that maybe is a little closer to retirement than they may want.
Okay. Yeah, I like it. I like it a lot. It's all about that preparation and awareness.
Yeah.
Perfect. Okay, we've got a few more pre-submitted questions, and if we have any time left over, I know we're going to be squeezing it. I've seen a couple of questions come in while we've been talking, so I will try to get there. If we don't, I will definitely follow up with the job seekers who have posted questions here. So question number 3, pre-submitted. This comes from Diana. Diana says, recently had a position eliminated after 17 and a half years with one company. How can I translate and transition the skills learned there to a new company and potentially a different career path?
Yeah. Well, one, I would highly recommend getting a career coach. I know that's not an easy thing to do when you've just been laid off. Perhaps there's a disruption in income, but making sure that...
Real quick, Greg, I'm sorry, I'm just going to, you can follow any number of career coaches, any of the ones that you see me connected with. I vouch for them. You can follow them. This is a community of people who really wants to help and is putting out free content on the regular. So I just want to say, if you can't, for whatever reason, access a career coach for one-on-one, there are certainly low-cost services, group programs, and also just totally free information being put out on the daily on LinkedIn. So if you need that, it's there. Okay, go ahead, Greg.
Agreed, 100%. I think taking advantage of all the resources. I think, making sure that you're practicing and training, because you've been at one job for a long time, and that's a wonderful thing. I think the downside is you may be a little rusty in terms of how to interview, right? So acknowledge that. Again, I'm all about awareness and acknowledgement, and, and practice, right? Make sure you have somebody who can help you to practice and really create that good talk track. I think transferable skills, again, it's about that talk track, and it's about being able to say, look, here's what I did over here. Here's how I think it applies there. And it's about making a case for yourself. But if you're doing that on the fly, if you're doing that without preparation, the delivery will be off. And you won't have, the likelihood of a good outcome won't be high there. But if you're prepared and you've practiced, there are all sorts of folks that have taken experiences in one industry and moved to another and have done so very successfully.
Yep. I'm with you on that one. You have to have that preparation. You won't be able to just off the cuff tell somebody how your experience matches if you don't know what that match looks like and what it is they're looking for. So yeah, absolutely. Love it. Okay. Another question. This is from Annabella. Top tips for job seekers prepping for new job opportunities. That's a pretty broad question, and I feel like a lot of it is just kind of doing some of the stuff that we've talked about. But is there anything additional that maybe we haven't touched on that you think somebody who maybe hasn't been in a job search in a while may need to know about?
Yeah, it's, create a list of target companies that you want to go after, right? And because you don't want to, as they say, boil the ocean, right? But if you have a particular industry you want to go after, terrific. Identify those companies that you think you really want to go after, research them, understand what their hiring practices are, what their culture is like, key executives, so on and so forth. And then most of all, continue to strengthen that network and see if you have anyone who either works there or knows someone who works there who can be an advocate for you. I think it doesn't matter what stage you're in. If you're at the early stages of your career journey, or if you're 55, as the other person mentioned, start now to strengthen or re-strengthen that network. Do it today. Whether you have, and even if there are folks listening that are gainfully employed today, do it, because that network will pay dividends for you in the future. And again, the biggest ingredient in creating that network is to help others get where they need to go. And then lo and behold, you'll have out of that, I think, a great network to tap into.
Yep, I totally agree. Talking about the people who are currently gainfully employed, one of the things I talk about a lot is being good or being nice to future you. So even if you are gainfully employed right now, that doesn't mean that building your network isn't going to be important. So definitely be nice to future you, because someday that employment may change and you may need that network. And if it's not there, then you're missing the opportunity right now today to get that started.
Yeah, absolutely.
Perfect. Final pre-submitted question. This is from Kelsey. Tips for someone applying for an internal promotion. What do you think about that, Greg?
I think it's very similar to what we talked about, right? So if you want that internal promotion, have you reached out to people within the organization to be an advocate on your behalf? Is there a mentoring program in your company? Is there great awareness of the job that you do in your company, right? Are you networking within your company, right? So it's really all the things, Lezlie, we talked about, just in a much more consolidated way, much more focused within a company. Look, again, it's about risk mitigation, and it's not always about the most talent. Talent matters. Please don't think it doesn't. It does. Talent matters, achievements matter, all those traditional things matter, but keep in mind it's about risk mitigation. So that advocacy really, really can help you, whether it's an internal promotion or getting in the door externally to find a role at a company that you're hoping to get into.
Yep, absolutely. Just a couple of questions that have come in since we've got like 2 minutes left. I have a question. I can't tell who it's from, but it says, do hiring managers give credit for self-training in skills the marketplace is looking for? So say if you took maybe a free online training or something like that, is that something that a job seeker can put on their resume and have it really take on value for someone in your position?
Yeah, I would say yes, but depending on how you want to present that. You put it on the resume down at the bottom, it's going to get glossed over. But if in the middle of the interview, you proactively say, look, I'm really passionate about this topic, and here are some things that I've done on my own to actually better myself. Are you kidding me? That a hiring manager is going to take note of that. You are an ambitious self-starter. It's all about how you present yourself. And again, it's about that talk track going into that interview. Remember, don't be reactive, be proactive when you're in front of that hiring manager so that you can get the message across that you want to get across.
Yep. All about controlling that narrative and having that talk track. And even when we were talking about the internal promotion, having a talk track centered around why you're going to be the right person to move into that promotion is going to be really important as well. Yeah. I know that we both have sort of a hard cut time here at 12, so I think we are going to go ahead and wrap up. For anyone who asked questions, I know my partner Andy has been trying to answer those. If we didn't get your question answered, feel free to DM me, and I would be happy to either answer that for you or pass it along to Greg. Greg, how can people contact you, and what is it that you might be able to help them with?
Yeah, I mean, feel free to reach out to me at careerfocusnetwork.com. Put your email in there, you'll get the ebook, and just let us know what you need. And I practice what I preach. I love networking. I am happy to help folks as much as my schedule will allow, but I have a wide array of folks that I believe in very much, Lezlie being one of them, and depending on your needs, we'll connect you with the right person that can help you go forward. And I can say one last thing, Lezlie, I know we're wrapping up, but I know a lot of the folks, we have a variety of people, but a lot of folks that have dialed in are probably, looking for a job, right? And the psychology, the mental aspect of looking for a job can be so grueling. So I want to acknowledge that. And I want to tell you, hang in there. And I want you to remember one thing, and I say this all the time. Steve Jobs was fired from Apple. He was fired from Apple. Like, we don't think about that. We don't talk about that because the man was a brilliant, successful entrepreneur, but he was fired from Apple and he had to come back and rescue it. So if Steve Jobs can get let go, understand that what you're going through, if you've been let go or laid off or just you've been displaced, understand it's not, as much as you can, just understand it's not about you personally. It's just something that happened. You're going to address it, you're going to attack it, you're going to figure it out, and you'll find your right place. So just wanted to give that reminder out to everyone who's out there maybe struggling a bit.
I love that, Greg. I love that positivity. That is fantastic. Thank you for that. Also, if anyone has tuned in today and is interested in learning more specifics and details about networking and utilizing LinkedIn in your networking, I did actually a crossover blog. So I wrote one blog talking about networking over on Career Focus Network on Greg's website. And then I did another blog that has a lot of crossover talking predominantly about LinkedIn on my website at resumelezlie.com. So if you go to both of those websites or either of those websites, it's the most recent blog on there. And then once you open whichever one you start with, there's going to be plenty of links to get you to the other one. So we've kind of put everything together for this interview and to talk about networking and LinkedIn. Greg, thank you again so much. Thank you to everyone who has been here watching and listening. I am going to put up just some contact information for Greg and myself at the end of the video. And if you have any questions, you can feel free to reach out. Greg, have a great day. I'm sure I will talk to you very soon.
Bye, guys.